Well, as humans, we search for answers, the meaning of life, even the shape of love. And in 2016, the AEC stumbled upon the answer to another mystery, the weight of a vote. Our new electronic scales picked up the faint pencil marks on the Senate ballot paper, and for a moment it felt transcendent, almost as if we were weighing the democratic soul of the nation. But of course, the real weight of a vote is in its value, and that value is created by trust, which is the one true coin of the democratic realm. That trust is at risk of being devalued. So inside the polling place, algorithms helped weigh the vote itself. And outside the polling place, new algorithms are beginning to attack democracy and undermine citizens' faith in electoral outcomes and democracy itself. So today, I'd like to talk about 4 important things. Why trust matters. What's happening with trust, even around the world. Thirdly, a new language I think we need to develop with each other. And fourthly, and most importantly, the one thing that we should be doing right now to invest in our democracy into the future, and that's digital literacy. And it might be the only thing that we can do. So firstly, why does trust matter? Well, I learnt a fair bit about trust in my decade and a bit as Australia's Electoral Commissioner. It's a very odd career choice for someone who spectacularly failed government and politics at university. Not just a small failure either, by the way. It was the sort of failure that you get called into the Dean's office and told don't bother coming back, even to repeat the subject. But what I did learn whilst I was Commissioner is that you can run a technically flawless election. But if some people believe conspiracy theories and false claims about electoral fraud, we as a people are undermined. And that's because in our system, it's trust that gives the pencil more weight than a gun. And that trust is really under pressure, even in Australia. Nutty, tinfoil hat conspiracies are on the rise, and I saw it all as Commissioner. Things like the AEC is erasing ballots after hours, or it's part of the UN or the IMF, or for me, that I was a secret Mason running some bonkers Dan Brown-style plot to take over Australia through the ballot box. Or one of my favourites demands that I release information about the involvement of extraterrestrials in Australia's electoral system. Real demands. And then one of the state commissioners told me that there was a party scrutineer who was convinced that the commission had smuggled in ballot papers during the day because the papers looked different at night. Well, of course they look different, they're paper. And they swell and absorb the atmosphere around it. And that's the same as democracy. It absorbs the mood around democracy as well. And if that mood is full of distrust, suspicion, and conspiracy theories, it really impacts on what people think about democracy and even where we live. And that's why trust really matters. Once we lose it, it's almost impossible to get back. And we've seen that overseas. So what's going on with democracy? Our second thing, an understanding of what's occurring with it. What we know is that threats to democracy don't always hop on tanks and drive across borders, although at the moment we're seeing it does that as well. Quite often, those threats arrive on our phones and invade our thoughts. Now, the global statistics here are a little bit frightening. The VDEM Institute in Sweden tells us there's only 29 fully functioning democracies left in the world, and this is extraordinary. It's the lowest level since the 80s. And this is at a time when we thought democracy had won, that it was in the ascendancy. And instead it's proved to be incredibly shallow and fragile. Elections are fragile too. And if you speak to election professionals, occasionally they use a little blessing, a professional prayer, almost like a magical incantation when they're talking to each other. They say, may your margins be wide, may your queues be short, and may your counting be swift, and various other versions of that as well. I think it's time for us to add a fourth line to that, and that's, may the process be understood. To get that understanding, of course, we need to keep running really good elections and minimising the errors that occur in this very manual and fragile system. But the real thing is to get citizens to look inside the electoral process and understand it, to be as transparent as we possibly can be, understand what it does, what it can do, and what it can't do. And that's particularly important given that AI is now producing such convincing fakes. It can demonstrate conspiracy theories where none exist, and it can persuade people that there's a problem with democracy. Now, in the interest of transparency, it took me a while to find my own rhythm with Australia's electoral system. When I was first appointed, on my very, very first visit to a polling place with a state electoral colleague, I threw up. Dramatically. Inside his brand new car. I don't know why, I don't know what happened. I've never been car sick before or since. I'm not allergic to the ballot. So I decided to take that as a democratic metaphor. To be fair, he didn't take as a metaphor at that point in time. But the metaphor for me is that democracy can be messy, and occasionally it can even throw up on you. And when it does, all we can do is clean up, focus on the future, and keep minting trust again and again and again. And within that messy thing called democracy, I think the one thing we really need to do is to create a civic space where we can talk to each other without shouting. Now, democracy unleashes passion, and occasionally that ends in anger. And maybe that's all okay. But if every debate ends in a shout, democracy and debate curdle into contempt. And that's poisonous for democracy and for our future. That brings me to our third point about a new language I think we need to develop with each other. Now, if we think all systems that survive have some sort of code, some sort of language that they use, and Latin is a great example. All those hundreds and hundreds of years ago in Europe, Latin wasn't just about the elites talking to each other. It was also about knowledge and ideas. And it meant that people could understand each other. So a lawyer in Paris could talk to a scholar in Prague, and they could actually pick up on what those ideas were. And Latin was that one of those pieces of connective tissue that helped keep Europe together. And many other things happened to pull Europe apart, but one of those things was that connective tissue failed, and they stopped understanding each other. If we want to avoid being plunged into our own democratic dark age, perhaps we need to develop our own language. And let's just overwork the Latin metaphor for a minute. Let's call it a lingua democratica. Now, it's not really a language, and I'm just using that as a hook, but it's a few civic principles that we agree are really important to us and that we defend them. And everyone in this room would have their own view about what those civic principles might be. But for me, they're things like elections really are free and fair in Australia. And when people make false claims to the contrary to try and undermine that democracy, we should actually take them on as a group. And that's even if they're in the media. That we agree with pluralism, even when the views of our opponents jar with the current zeitgeist and we disagree with them. Thirdly, that the acceptance of results and the peaceful transfer of power should be the bedrock of our democracy forever and moving forward. And then finally, and probably most importantly, that our shared right to decide our future through democratic means should be protected from disinformation forever. Now, if we agree with those democratic principles and we want to defend them, we might need to do some stuff to actually make it happen. And that brings me to my fourth, final and most important point, the need for digital literacy. Now, there's some good news here. In Australia, elections are trusted. And in fact, in some cases, they're even loved. But the problem is, truth has terrible marketing. Lies, we are told by research, consistently swirl online about 6 times faster than the truth. And there's a whole range of reasons behind that. People find lies interesting and even exciting, and truth can be really boring. And so occasionally we're told, well, the way to deal with that, if there are lies online and false information, let's use censorship and take stuff down. Well, friends, in my view, I think censorship is democracy's kryptonite. It destroys the trust it says it's going to save. And that's because if we tell adults that they can't be trusted with information, they stop trusting information at all, particularly information that comes from government. And then sometimes people say, well, we'll pass laws. And there's all sorts of things that go into that about labelling with AI-based content and takedown powers. And occasionally people point to Europe and what the EU are doing. And that may be part of the package, but it's only a small part because laws don't actually create resilient citizens. Information does. For me, the thing that we should be doing is investing in digital literacy. Now, just to be clear, when I say digital literacy, I mean a couple of different components. I mean digital literacy, the ability to go online, navigate and understand how it works. But also important is media literacy. And that's the ability to look at information and to work out whether it's true or not, to assess that information. And thirdly is civic literacy, the ability to understand how our country works so that we can all talk to each other about our future in a very reasonable way. And I think those three things together make up the minimum standards of 21st century citizenship, and we really need it. Now, there is some good news in Australia as well. Stuff's already occurring. Some states are putting digital literacy and media literacy in their curriculums for schools, which is great. There are some excellent researchers and academics who are producing guides and tracking what's occurring. Even governments are slowly starting to get involved. And anyone involved in that process, and you might even be here in the room, deserves praise, and there should be more of it. None of it's scaled, none of it's nationally coordinated, and none of it is anywhere near being funded to the extent that we need with the problem that we face. And this is a really serious issue. There are some examples where things are being done well. If we look at the Australian Electoral Commission, their Stop and Consider campaign is reaching about 20% of the community on a regular basis at election time. It's cheap, it's scalable, it works, it's being copied by countries such as Canada, and we should grab that stuff and really scale it up full time. There's also some great work overseas. Taiwan's doing good stuff, but Finland is the standout. They've made digital literacy as part of their national security, with the result that they're one of the most disinformation-resistant societies on earth. And that's no mean feat, given where they're located. If I look at us, my very rough estimate is that over 20 years, we've spent something like $11 billion on government ads, federal, state and local. And with the best will in the world, a large amount of that has been political in nature, from all sides of politics, and with a few standout examples, most of it is eminently forgettable. Imagine if we took just a little bit of that cash, not even new money, just money that's being spent on that, and invested it in digital literacy. It would make a huge difference to who we are. And that brings me back to where we started. The algorithms, the one that measured the weight of the vote and others outside the polling place that are being corrosive to democracy itself. We spoke about the importance of trust, what's happening with it, even our lingua democratica, but most importantly of all is digital literacy. In my view, the one thing we need to do right now is to invest in a mammoth, nationally coordinated and fully funded digital literacy campaign for all aspects of our society, from the very youngest through to the other end of that spectrum. And if we do, the payoff will really be immense. Now, we said at the start that the real weight of a vote is in its value, and that value is created by trust, the one true coin of the electoral realm. Well, digital literacy is where we mint those coins. And if we do all of that and we invest in it and we keep minting those coins, what it'll mean is that our kids and their kids in the future will go into a polling place and they won't just be picking up a pencil, they'll be picking up a birthright, and they'll mark a piece of paper and put it in a plain cardboard box like this, but they'll be feeling the weight of generations.